MC Kids was released onto the market 1 year after the Super Nintendo was released onto the market. Because of this, it was compared a lot to Super Mario World. But Super Mario World has courses that are designed to challenge the player to get to the end of them, whereas MC Kids is full of courses that are designed to be explored by the player in order to get the different collectibles that are scattered through them. Very similar to what you would do in Super Mario 64. But in this case, it did it many, many years earlier. MC Kids was commissioned by McDonald's and published by Virgin. Now, McDonald's didn't have their own dev team, so they commissioned a few developers to make it. Let's go ahead and put the game in. Now here we have our Super Mario 3 style world map. So we'll go to stage 1. Now remember, if this was a Mario game, which this game was often compared to, the object is just to run to the end of the stage. But if we're doing that, it's quite boring. Done. So now we're going to play it the way that the game wants you to play it. So the arches are the main collectible of the game. Now I'm on a springboard, but you'll notice I can't get those 2 arches at the top. This is intentional. It's there to get you thinking, well, how do I get those arches? So here we are. That's my puzzle card that I'm going to be looking for in the stage. If you run fast enough, that's called a spinner on the end, it will reverse gravity. So now I can grab the card, and now I can explore the level upside down. That's really cool. So that block I just did is called a reverser. It'll fling you back to the start of the stage. They use that to like end bonus games and things like that. So here, now I figured out how to get the top 2 arches, which is really important. Now not only do you have momentum, but you also have weight. So this is a super springboard, but obviously it won't work unless I have some extra weight. So now if I grab a block, then I really go flying. So again, if I use my momentum, I can activate the spinner, but that won't always work. If I don't have enough momentum, I'll just fall off. And the goal is you want to grab that spinning arch in the finish line. From here, Mick and Mac go through the different stages, and they will collect cards. You can see I collected the first one, so it revealed one of the cards in the top corner of the screen. The main way that you progress in MC Kids is by collecting the puzzle cards. So the main hook of the game is centered all around the stage design. These stages need to be fun to explore so that you will explore them and collect the puzzle cards and then progress to later parts of the game. Here are a few ways that the rest of the game's mechanics lift the stage design and keep the player hooked until the game is over. To keep the pacing quick and the exploration manageable, each stage is a small open stage that is meant to be explored. As demonstrated before, if you just wanted to get to the end of that stage, that's easy, but very little progression is made. After you collect a card in a stage, you are now faced with a risk versus reward choice that must be made. Do you head right to the finish line to bank the collected card, or do you keep exploring? If you lose a life after collecting a card, then you will need to go back and recollect it before you cross the finish line in order for that card to count and be unlocked on the map screen. Along with the player progressing through the different stages and worlds, the stages, themes, graphics, and game mechanics also progress with the player, giving the player something new to explore and to do. You start at Ronald's Clubhouse. This is your basic grassland stage, but it introduces the basic mechanics that you will be interacting with in all the future worlds, like the springboards, the spinners, crossing the water with boats, and the warp zippers. Even in this first world, you have some stage variety, with one stage that includes a lake and another stage that includes a forest, along with all the other grassland stages. After the clubhouse, you will go to Birdie's treehouse up in the sky. Now the sky theme is fully explored, with some of the stages being in the clouds with hidden paths and floating platforms. But other stages are icy because of the altitude. These stages will have slippery slopes that the player can use to gain momentum quickly. Finally, we have snow stages that include snowballs to throw and snow bridges that you need to cross carefully without any extra weight or momentum. Next is Grimace's Highlands. This is a mountainous world, but not an icy world. Here you will find new enemies like the charging moose and the stalking spring. You'll cross bridges that are falling apart, traverse waterfalls, and navigate stages that remind me of Sonic the Hedgehog stages that usually have a higher path and a lower path. But all of the paths will need to be explored in order to find the different puzzle cards. You move from here to the Professor's Workshop. Here you will find levels that are on a dock or a ship. Many of the stages include sand. Sand can be dug up, but not lifted or thrown like blocks in snow. Often behind the sand, you'll find things like fossils to keep the player engaged visually with those changing graphics. The sand is mostly used as a puzzle-solving mechanic, where the player must build paths that are used to progress, but also may need to be fashioned in a way that you can backtrack through them if needed. Let me share one of my favorite puzzles that uses a combination of sand and the spinner. This requires the player to dig the path down and then go through a spinner to reverse gravity and then traverse the path while you're upside down so you can get to where you need to in order to collect the puzzle card. After you help the professor, he builds a rocket and blasts you off to the moon where you meet Cosmic. Of course, here you have the standard mechanics of reduced gravity because you're on the moon, but they explore this concept with other mechanics that you're familiar with, like springboards. Now, instead of just springing you the normal distance, they spring you way higher, and they have an entire stage built around this. There are also hidden paths, like you saw in the cloud stages, but now you're on the surface of the moon. And they even have an entire stage that is made out of cheese. I love that. Finally, we get to Hamburglar's Hideout. Now, the theme of fire and lava has been done many times for, the end of the game and the final boss. But there are a few new ways that MC Kids tackles it, with burning bridges, blocks that float across the lava, and treadmills that travel on rails. So even at the end of the game, there are still lots of new mechanics to keep the player guessing and exploring. MC Kids illustrates an excellent combination of exploring and platforming to keep the player hooked from beginning to the end of the game. There's always a reward for exploring, whether it's just in the form of arches or one-ups or puzzle cards or even warp zippers. If you've explored somewhere, then the game will reward you with something. And it's a great feeling as you're exploring all the different worlds and as you get deeper and deeper into them, and you start finding things like secret cards or cards for other worlds that you're not in. The stages are kept at a manageable size so that you don't get stuck in a single stage. And the way that the worlds are set up, even if you haven't found all 6 cards for a world, you can still move on and explore different stages and then come back later. The addition of new mechanics and new settings for stages as you progress through the game really helps the player feel that they're not where they started. They've made progress and they are going to get to the end. And this is a great feeling to have in a game. A lot of the mechanics are only found in one stage, like the comets on the pier or the moon monsters on the moon. These mechanics are only found once. If you can get past the McDonald's arches and the McDonald's characters, then you may also discover the hidden gem on the NES called MC Kids.